right, this is your Chapter 6 review for your final, and I'm going to ask that you please watch all the way through for this part of the video, and then it's completely up to you. If you want to see a few examples, you can continue the video. And remember, you have all of the answers for this note sheet attached that you can look at if you want to check your answers. So, important things to remember about our exponent and polynomial chapter. First thing, I'm going to walk through the 4 different power, or actually only the 3 different power rules that we talked about. So the first one was when you were asked to do a power to a power. So a power to a power looks something like this. So you'd have maybe x to the 3rd power raised to the 5th power. So if you see something like this where you have an outside exponent, you're going to multiply those exponents together to get 15. So this would simplify it to be x to the 15th power because you multiply those exponents. Okay. The second rule was when you were given a multiplication problem with exponents in it. So if you had x to the 3rd times x to the 5th, the rule was that you would add those exponents together. So this problem would simplify to be x to the 8th power when you add those together. And then our third rule was a division, when you had something like x to the 3rd over x to the 1st. And if you were asked to simplify this, you would subtract the exponents to get x to the 2nd. Now it's important to remember that wherever the bigger number is, that's where your final answer was going to be. So for this one, our bigger number is on top, so x to the 2nd would be on the top. So just be careful of whichever team is going to win, okay? All right, so those are your power rules. And then this chapter also brought us to when we had to FOIL to solve a problem, so our binomial Bob. So let's just refresh on FOIL real quick. So when you're given 2 binomials to multiply together, remember the F stands for first. We're going to multiply the first 2 terms together. The O stands for our outer 2 terms. Our I stands for inner. You're going to multiply the inner 2 terms. And the L stands for last. So that's when you have 2 binomials that you're multiplying together. And just write yourself a note that it is multiplication when you're doing this. And remember, at the end, you're always going to have to combine your like terms. And that's really the main idea for this chapter. If you'd like to continue to see a few examples, I'd be happy to walk you through. If not, you can be finished. So this whole page right here is what you're going to see on your final exam when you're asked to simplify monomials with powers. So I'm going to pick out a few here. I'm going to start with example 2 and walk you through example 2. So this would be our first rule, where it was a power to a power, because we have this outside exponent. So what that means is I'm going to multiply this outside power by all of the exponents that I see inside of the parentheses. But for this problem, I also have a coefficient, so a big number on the front. So for that, it's a little different. I'm actually going to raise 2 to the 4th power. So this is going to look like this, 2 to the 4th power, and then I have an x. So the rule is I'm going to multiply those powers together. So this would give me x to the 24th power. And then for y, I would have y to the 3rd times to the 4th, which 3 times 4 gives me 12. Now this problem, my powers are simplified, but I still have 2 to the 4th power that I can simplify a little bit more. So what that means is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which would give me 16. So my final answer for this one would be 16, x to the 24th, y to the 12th. So be careful of your coefficients, those outside numbers. All right, the next one I would like to walk you through, let's do a division. So let's do number 8. So remember the rule when you're dividing monomials with powers is you're going to subtract those powers, but this one also has coefficients. So let's do the x's first, the things with the powers. So the rule is I'm going to subtract them, but you have to think about where the bigger number is and which team is going to win. So I'm going to subtract 5 minus 3 and get 2, but it looks like I have more on the bottom. So that means x to the second needs to stay on the bottom. So there's nothing left on top for this one. Then I'm going to look at my coefficients. It's a different rule for coefficients. If I covered these x's up and you just had 12 over 15, so if I just gave you a fraction, 14, and asked you to simplify it, you'd find the biggest number you can divide by each, or you could just type it into your calculator. So the biggest number I can divide by 12 and 14 is 2. So I'd be left with 6 on top and 7 on bottom. So that's exactly what I'm going to write in my problem. Okay? And then the last one I'd like to go through with you is number 12. So number 12 was a multiplication problem, and the rule was you're going to add those exponents. But we also have coefficients here. So if it's a multiplication problem, I'm going to multiply 6 times 2. And then I'm going to add the exponents with my like terms. So I have a to the third and a to the second. If I add those together, I would get a to the fifth. Then I have b to the first and b to the fourth, so I'd be left with b to the fifth as well. And that's your final answer. Okay, moving on, let's do one FOIL problem here. This is just the distributive property. I'm going to have you guys just try those. Remember, this rule is where you have to add the exponent, so be careful of that. Check your answers after you do those. And let's jump down to one of these binomial Bob problems. So I'm going to do example 21 with you. So if I'm going to do first, outer, inner, last, remember first would be our first two terms. So 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is x squared. And then I'm going to do my outer two terms. So 3x times 5 would give me 15x. And then my inner two terms would give me negative 8x. Remember, you're multiplying those two coefficients. And then my last two terms would be negative 4 and 5, which would give me negative 20. So for binomial Bob, you're always going to have like terms after you do FOIL. So I'm going to write my final answer, 6x squared. 15 minus 8 would give me 7. 7x minus 20. And that's binomial Bob for you. Okay? So good luck with this section and check your answers.